Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Greg Andrade, and I will be your moderator for this evening. This is the start of a debate series that will be sponsored by the Christian Focused Toastmasters Club and also by Backyard Skeptics, an atheist group in Orange County. And although this introductory kickoff debate does not cover an official subject other than Christianity versus atheism, future debates will have a topic selected in alternation by each side, and also a moderator that will be selected alternately by each side. These debates are meant to provide an open discussion of the difficulties of understanding two entirely different worldviews. And although Christianity is overwhelmingly popular in the United States, there are some interesting trends in American culture. Recent surveys indicate that as many as 20% of Americans are non-believers or self-report as not having religious beliefs. And if you ask Americans under the age of 30, that figure rises to as high as 30%. So there's some interesting trends on that front. But on the side of religiosity, 48% of Americans believe that God made humans in their current form without resorting to evolution or any evolutionary processes taking place. And only 15% believe that human beings evolved over millions of years from less advanced forms of life without God having any guidance or say in the process. So clearly there are some competing views out there, and these debates are designed in part to explore those differences and to examine how they color people's approaches and views to particular issues. Now, those in the room who are here, or those watching or listening at home, and may have friends or family that you'd like to let know about this debate or others, please keep in mind that this is being streamed on the backyardskeptics.com website. So feel free to text or engage in social media and let other people know about these debates and the whole series. Again, they're streamed on backyardskeptics.com. But that does bring me to a very important point. At this stage, please make sure that you've silenced your cell phones or any other electronic devices, so hopefully we can proceed a nice silence here, and out of respect for our participants. I just want to cover our debate structure, which is pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to begin with opening statements, and each side will have an opportunity to make statements. On the Christian side, we'll have one participant who will be giving a single opening statement, and on the atheist side, we'll have a statement from each of our participants. Then we'll move into a questions phase, and each side will have an opportunity to pose a question to the other, in fact, two questions to the other without rebuttal. Then we'll move right into our conversation time, and that's where we'll have an opportunity to debate and discuss those questions and the issues they raise. Finally, we'll move into closing statements, and again, each side will have representatives. On the Christian side, there'll be a single representative giving a closing statement, and on the atheist side, we'll have a pair of closing statements. After that, we'll move into the question and answer phase, and that's where you folks here in the audience have an opportunity to take part in the proceedings and ask questions of our participants. Now, before I get into the introductions, let's take the temperature of the room, so to speak. How many here will describe themselves as Christians?
Of one kind of another.
Of one sort or another, sure. Okay, and how many here would describe themselves as atheists or non-believers? Okay.
60-40.
Maybe a 60-40 split or so. So a pretty healthy turnout from both sides, which is good for a discussion of this nature. Now I'd like to introduce our participants and then move quickly to our opening statements. Let's start with the Christian side. We have David Lehman. Dr. Lehman has a BME from the University of Minnesota, a Master of Divinity from Grace Seminary, a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Oxford Graduate School in Tennessee, and a PhD from Louisiana Baptist University. He lectures at churches, conferences, and university campuses on creationism, cults, and evidence for Christian faith. Also on the Christian side, we have Douglas Hamp. He's the author of several works, including Discovering the Language of Jesus, The First 6 Days, and Corrupting the Image. And he earned his MA in the Hebrew Bible and its World from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And you can find Doug online at douglashamp.com. That's DouglasHamp.com. On the atheist side, we have Bruce Gleason. Bruce is the director of Free Thought Alliance and the founder and organizer of the largest regional atheist meetup group in the area, Backyard Skeptics, which has over 1,000 members. Bruce is also the producer and director of the Orange County Atheist cable TV show. And then next we have Bill Zercher, also on the atheist side. Bill studied economics and government at Yale University, and after several decades in the oil industry, he retired to pursue an interest in teaching. He and his wife live in Laguna Niguel, where he teaches math and also writes on the side. So thank you, gentlemen, for participating in this debate. Thank you all for attending. Let's go ahead and move into our opening statements, and we're going to begin with David Lehman, and he's going to talk with us for about 15 minutes.
I made a change on that.
Oh.
I'll be going.
Oh, sorry. Bruce is going to kick this off. Bruce will have about 7.5 minutes, and then I think we're turning to David and then back to Bill.
If you didn't catch that, Dave's going to be taking all of the 15 minutes of the opening statement, and then Doug will be following up at the closing statement with the equivalent time of both of us, so we're kind of spreading out equally. Well, welcome everybody. I enjoy debates. Do you enjoy debates? I think this is great time. I really want to thank Dave and Doug for coming, and actually Dave was the one who invited us, so yay for Dave. And I don't know if you know, but Dave and I actually have a social affair. We're both West Coast swing dancers, so we see each other at West Coast swing events. I met him initially at a West Coast swing event in Anaheim. Great guy, like the guy, a little odd in my particular opinion, but I'm sure he probably thinks the same thing of me. So now we're going to start with the screen. I don't know, we were going to try to, the first time we've been here, we didn't preview the room, so if anybody can't see the screen, I apologize. I'd like to talk about the basics and get some definitions out of the way, and then I'll get into some ideas and some other things we might be able to talk about later. The first one is, I am an atheist. Is it working? There it is. I am an atheist. What does an atheist mean? What do they believe? Do they believe in anything? Well, if you take that we don't believe in a God or any deity, and everything else that we believe is pretty much equal. So we believe in a lot of things, just like most everybody in the world, but we don't believe in a deity. That doesn't mean that we think a deity, that we say a deity doesn't exist. We don't say that. That's a different type of atheist altogether. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about agnosticism. Agnosticism is about knowledge. Atheism and theism is about belief. Personally, I'm an agnostic atheist because I don't know. I don't think Doug or Dave knows. I don't think anybody knows the absolute truth. I think that a solid description of how you believe is a good thing. Some people don't want to be categorized or pigeonholed. I think it's a good thing because it lets people know who you are and it can identify with them. I'd like to know later on why, I'm going to back up a little bit. What would it take to change my mind as an atheist? Well, it'd be easy. I could change my mind very, very simply. If God just simply moved a couple dozen stars in the sky several hundred light years instantaneously, that would get me on a good start. Something supernatural, something that can't be explained naturally. That would do it for me. Now, I have to ask, how would Doug and Dave change their minds? Do they have absolute knowledge? Are they dogma-ridden? Is there any place there to say that they might be wrong? Because I can say, for a fact, I could be wrong. But it's about one piece of sand in the entire beaches of the world that I think that I'm wrong. I still could be proven wrong. So belief does not equal knowledge. No matter how much one believes, it does not mean that they know what they believe. Even if one so strongly feels it in their bones, it does not have anything to do with knowledge. So when somebody says, I know God, they believe extremely strongly, but they don't know if God exists. They believe that God exists. When they say they know that God exists, it's just their strong feelings, but technically it has to be proven evidence, not anecdotal personal evidence, but real evidence. Although feelings are real, they can be invalidated very easily. It's not a good judge of what is real by how you feel. That doesn't mean I don't love my wife. I feel my wife. I love my wife very much, and that is real, and I can prove that she loves me as well. We can measure societal health, and if we compare other countries, we can see that most atheistic countries have better societal health. We're talking about infant mortality, low homophobia, women's rights, free education, a less of a glass ceiling for women, low murder rates, low pregnancy and abortion rates, low obesity. That's pretty good, Bill. You're keeping up very well. Nearly every measure of societal health is best among atheist populations in the world. So you have to ask, why is God rewarding the atheistic countries? You got to ask that. Now the prison population. This is a really good one. See that little tiny sliver at the top? That's 0.2% of atheists in prisons. Compared to what? How many Christians? 75%. Just about the amount that's in the general public. Remember I said there were 21 million atheists? 20%? This is 100 times less in prisons. I want to talk a little bit about morality tonight, and that's one of the graphs I'm going to be using. There has never been in the world an atheist that has risen the atheist flag and killed other people for being religious. Yes, there were Stalin and Pol Pot, but they did not raise an atheist flag. They raised their own political dogma flag. But nowhere in the world can you see this. This is one reason why I'm an atheist. How do we find out what the truth is? Dave and I, and Doug and I, are actually truth seekers. It's just that our truth, meaning my truth, comes from reason, facts, and knowledge that is based in reality, and the religionist truths come from supposedly a supernatural inspired book written 2,000 years ago that I think should belong in a museum. Dave, Doug, and Bill and I are not professional scientists. So how can we tell if something is true in the world? We ask the experts. We know that cell phones don't give us cancer because of the experts. We know that cancer drugs have a worthwhile effect on cancer patients because of the experts. We know that the brakes in our car will work because of the experts. The reason we know this is because there is an overwhelmingly consensus with each narrow field of study that agrees on one particular fact. And most of us trust that the consensus is true until other data comes along and supports more evidence and it outweighs the pre-existing evidence. I am on the red right now. I had 2 more paragraphs to go, so I'm going to have to make it up later. And now I think it's Doug's turn. Dave's turn, excuse me.
Actually, atheists are just better at not getting caught.
Ooh, touche, Dave.
And I appreciate the opportunity that we have to get together and just share these things. As I look around and I see the animals, the trees, the flowers, the sun, the moon, the stars, the people, I can know something about the Creator, but from the creation, He that created. Everybody is telling me I'm not speaking loud enough. Is this? Oh, okay. Very good. So I look around and I see these animals, the trees, the flowers, the sun, the moon, the stars, the people, and I can know something about the Creator from the creation. He that formed the eye, does He not see? He that created the ear, does He not hear? We have a personality. Therefore, we'd expect the Creator to have a personality as well. The cause is usually greater than the effect. But for answers to questions like, who am I? Am I just an intelligent animal, or do I have a soul? What about life after death? How should I use my time and my talents? And what does God require from me? If He went to the trouble to create us, obviously He's going to want us to know what He requires of us, but where's that information found, and how can I be sure that it's from God? And so I look throughout the gamut of literature available to us as humans, and I find one book that passes the test required to be the Word of God, and I believe that's the Bible. And the 4 tests that I would give are inspiration, inerrancy, preservation, and illumination. Inspiration comes from the Greek word theopneustos. Literally means God breathed or God directed. It's like a master musician playing a piano. Each one of the keys on the piano has a different sound, just like each one of the apostles and prophets had a different personality, but God superintended the finished product so that it was without error. And of course it would have to be without error, otherwise I'd need a red letter edition to tell me what's true, what to teach my children if I had any, what to send my missionaries out with. And of course we don't have that. 3,408 times in the Bible it claims to be the Word of God. Thus saith the Lord spoke saying, you've accepted these not as the words of man, but for what they really are, the Word of God. And then it makes a challenge to all the other religious writings in the world. Isaiah 43:10, 44, 45, and 46, it makes this statement over and over in different words. It says, I, the Lord, am one God. There's none else beside me, before me, or that should come after me, who's able to tell the end from the beginning. So if God's in charge, he's going to be able to tell the future. Nobody else can do that. And of course, we find that 28.5% of the Old Testament and 21.5% of the New Testament is prophetic. And we go through all the different cities, Tyre, Sidon, Memphis, Thebes. I've just got a whole list of cities, and each one would take about 15, 20 minutes to describe the details of the prophecy and then how it was fulfilled. We look at Tyre, we see that there were 7 things that were going to happen to the city of Tyre. It was going to be destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Others would participate in its destruction. That the rubble would be scraped into the sea. It would become the place for the spreading of fishermen's nets, and it would never be rebuilt again. And those are exactly the things that happened to the city of Tyre. And of course, we could go through each one of these cities and see that kind of detail. It's really kind of interesting to see how the exact description in Scripture has been fulfilled. We know when these things were written. One fellow, Peter Stoner, who was head of the math department at Westmont College, taught statistics, and he said, what's the probability that just, some of these things would happen? And so he finally came down to the Messiah. How many prophecies are there in the Old Testament concerning the coming Messiah? Of course, he said there's about 300. There's actually about 456 prophecies in the Old Testament concerning the Messiah. And he said, what's the probability of just 8 of those things happening in the life of any one person? For example, that he'd be born in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2, that he'd be sold for 30 pieces of silver, that it would be used to buy a potter's field and cast onto the temple floor, that he'd be crucified between 2 thieves, that his garments would be cast lots for. He said, just take 8 of those prophecies and it would be the same as spreading silver dollars over the state of Texas, 2 feet high, marking one, mixing them up and have a blindfolded guy pick the right one the first time. He says, what's the probability of 48 of those things happening in the life of any one person? He says that's the same as taking electrons, cramming them one up against another. It would take you 19 million years to count a line 1 inch long at the rate of 250 a minute. So to count a cubic inch, it would take you 19 million years times 19 million years times 19 million years just to count them. Start at the center of the Earth, go 6 billion light years in radius, create these balls of electrons, 6 billion light years in radius at the rate of 500 a minute for 6 billion years, and it'd be 10 to the 10th times that. Mark one, mix them up and have a blindfolded guy pick the right one the first time, and that's just 48 prophecies. And we're talking about several hundred. There's no prophecies concerning Buddha before he came, no prophecies concerning Muhammad before he came, no prophecies concerning Joseph Smith, Charles Taze Russell, the founder of any other cult or world religion before they came. Christianity is unique. And so we see that God has given. And then the next thing I would ask is, well, how do I know that what we have today is what was written down by the early apostles and prophets? Well, we could take the Old Testament, or we could just take the New Testament, for example. We have about 24,500 existing manuscripts. We got 5,400 Greek manuscripts. And I was talking to Gleason Archer, who probably one of the leading textual critics in the world. He spoke 29 languages, because I'd ask him about Ugaritic. Oh, that's right, I teach that every other year. But he said it's interesting that there's only, and he's not the only one that said this, there's only 400 words in the entire New Testament that there's any question about at all. And he says, this is what he told me. I was talking to him on the phone one Sunday night. He said, it's as if God inspired the variants, because the variants do not change the meaning or the doctrine in any way. So for all practical purposes, we have the original autographs. So we got a 99.5% accuracy of the original words of the text, and the words that we're not sure of don't change anything. So this is what we call preservation. In Isaiah 40, verse 8, it says, the grass withers and the flower fades, but my word shall endure forever. In other words, God's promised to keep it together, and this is how we know, just simply by the sheer number. If we had just one copy, we would know what percentage accuracy we're dealing with. And then we have, the last one is kind of this idea of the illumination. There's something about the Bible that speaks to the heart of man like no other book. So many people have become Christians without any outside influence, just reading their Bible. It's nice to have it in your own language. But then we look at the creation itself. His invisible power and attributes are clearly seen by the things that are made, so that they're without excuse. And I think there's 3 testimonies that we have, every one of us. We have his conscience, his spirit, God's the light that lighteth every man that comes into the world. Job talks about eternity in their hearts. We all seem to think that there's more to life than just what we're experiencing right now. There is the testimony of the creation itself, the detail, the complexity of creation. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. The firmament declares his handiwork. We can just look at the human body, the eye, with over 10 million photoreceptor cells in the back. Each one of those photoreceptor cells can perform the equivalent of 500 nonlinear simultaneous differential equations 100 times a millisecond. When you consider that there's 10 million of them interacting with each other in complex ways, it would take a crazed supercomputer over 100 years to simulate what takes place in the back of your eye many times every second. The ear in the cochlear duct has 3 outer layers and 1 inner layer of hair cells. These hair cells have a little trapdoor that can open and close. This is a spring cell over 20,000 times a second. Your ear has a dampening mechanism so that you can stand next to an airplane taking off, or you can hear a pin drop. But it takes a little time, so if you have somebody shoot a bullet right off a gun right next to you, you could actually do some damage, but your ear will adjust. It's an amazing, complex thing. I was talking to one of my Muslim friends, and he said, well, whoever created the ear must have known about hearing in order to create an instrument so precisely designed for that purpose alone. So I think there's only 2 possible worldviews. Either there's a theistic explanation for things or a non-theistic. Either God did it or he didn't. Either it happened naturally or supernaturally. So if you disprove one, I think you've proved the other. I don't think there's any other options. Well, as I look at these evidence, I start to, where do we come from? In fact, that's a question that we always want to know. One of my professors at Grace Seminary, actually he was president of the school, said there's 2 things that determine how a person will respond in this life. One, where they think they came from, and where they think they're going. And so we kind of study the creation, and we kind of study prophecy. We try to understand what is the future, what does God have in store for us. And we like to know, most people would like to know what's going to happen. I kind of enjoy studying the cosmophysicists. They have never-changing kaleidoscope of quantum fluctuations of nothing into everything, cosmic inflation, multiple universes, 10-dimensional spaces, effects without causes, black holes, universes reproducing themselves, cold dark matter, ordered systems out of chaotic explosions, hyperstrings, antimatter, loops of time, all kinds of these wonderful things generated by higher mathematics. And they come up with some interesting concepts. The Copenhagen interpretation 1 is that there is no deep reality. This is quantum physics. Reality is created by observation, so the moon is demonstrably not there if no one looks. Reality is undivided wholeness. Reality consists of steadily increasing number of parallel universes. The world obeys some kind of non-human reasoning, so really there's no way we could know. Or consciousness creates reality. So this kind of leads us to the idea that our universe is simply one of those things that happens from time to time. So in other words, a tiny bit of nothingness packed together so tightly it blew up and it created everything that we see. That's the concept basically behind the Big Bang Theory. First of all, nothingness can't pack itself together. There's no way to push itself into a pile. Second, a vacuum has no density. It said that nothingness got very dense and that's why it exploded, but a total vacuum is the opposite of total density. Third, there can't be any ignition to explode the nothingness. No fire, no match. Couldn't be a chemical explosion. For there are no chemicals, it couldn't be a nuclear explosion. There were no atoms. Fourth, there's no way to expand it. How can you expand what isn't there? Even if that magical vacuum could somehow be pulled together by gravity, what would then cause the pile of emptiness to push out? The gravity that caused it to come together would keep it from expanding. Fifth, nothingness can't produce heat. The intense heat caused by the exploding nothingness is supposed to have changed the nothingness into protons, neutrons, and electrons. First, the empty vacuum in the extreme cold of outer space couldn't get hot by itself. Second, an empty void couldn't magically change itself into matter. Third, there can't be any heat without an energy source. And then we have the problem with this proteins. Where did protein and DNA come from? Sagan called this a biological treadmill because in order to form DNA, you can't form or even exist without pre-existing proteins. Sagan called this idea something, he called it a biological treadmill. If both sufficient DNA to code 124 proteins and sufficient protein, 124, to house and catalyze the DNA, independently evolved and sufficiently subsequently associated themselves to create the first living entity, the individual probabilities must be multiplied. There's a guy that wrote a book, Why Song, and in it I tried to follow his reasoning pretty carefully, and it is interesting. He comes up with the fact that it would be over you'd have the total probability would be 1 over 10 to the 89,190th power. That's the probability of forming DNA times 1 over 10 to the 78,436 power, the probability of forming 124 proteins. You multiply that together, which you mean to add the exponents, it's 1 over 10 to the 167,626 power, assuming 1 million Earths around every star in the universe and every single amino acid was trying to form a protein. Now, you can only cram 10 to the 130th power electrons in the known universe. So, despite the virtually impossible odds, proteins arose by chance processes. There's not the least remotest reason to believe that they could ever form a membrane-encased, self-reproducing, self-repairing, metabolizing living cell. That's a jump in complexity that nobody has ever been even to imagine. That's what caused Michael Behe, who wrote Darwin's Black Box. I mean, here is pretty much a secular cell biologist saying there is just no way that this could happen. Excellent book. So then we have this living technology that is so completely complex. We want to find out how to do stuff. We kind of watch some of the animals. We try to figure out how to create self-sharpening blades, and we look at the rat, and we see that just the right angle to sharpen its teeth as it cuts. We look at metamorphosis. 87% of insects have some kind of form of metamorphosis. And for example, the monarch butterfly, after 2 weeks, it eats milkweed continuously, and then eventually, about 2 weeks later, it forms a chrysalis. All of its bodily organs, its brain, dissolve into this gray mush. And 2 weeks later, it comes out as a beautiful monarch butterfly that can navigate 3,000 miles with a brain the size of a head of a pin. Now, how did this actually evolve? What caused this process? I think the codes have to be there initially. It's not something that would happen gradually. That is one of the problems, because the idea of uniformitarianism, that this happened gradually, is been rejected by more than 50%, at last I heard, of the scientists. Charles Lyell came up with the idea of uniformitarianism. And Darwin even said if it can't be done in small incremental steps, his theory would totally break down. But Stephen Gould, Stephen Stanley, Niles Eldredge, and several others became punctuationists, where they said, well, every 50,000 years we're going to have several million mutations. All of a sudden. Well, I asked Jerry Bergman at this was 5 years ago, at the International Creation Conference. And I asked him, I said, here's a guy with 4 earned doctorates and 9 master's degrees. I asked him, has anybody ever seen a positive mutation? Because I had just downloaded Mendel's Accountant onto my laptop. It took several hours to do that. And he said, well, according to Mendel's Accountant, it'd take 1 billion positive mutations to get a nascent organ, a new organ of some kind. But not only do you have to get the new organ, you have to locate it in the right part of the body. Then you not only have to locate it in the right place, or you'd have to connect it to all other bodily organs, all through a random process. So I asked him, has anybody ever seen a positive mutation? And he said, wait till the rest of them get here. So we have 200 leading scientists from all over the world crammed into this room. And I asked Jerry, has anybody ever seen a positive mutation? He says, nobody's ever documented a single positive mutation. But I need 1 billion of them to make this thing work, to get it, and it has to all affect the same part of the body, and they can't. If you get a negative one, you might have to start all over again. So it seems very difficult for anybody to imagine how this could happen naturally. So I would just say, as Dr. Ernest Mayr from Harvard said, mutations provide the only mechanism that would cause evolution to occur at all. So with that, I'll close.
Okay, so good evening. My name is Bill Zercher. I don't believe in the existence of any gods or goddesses. It is certainly possible that one or more of such beings exist. But if so, they do not appear to expend much effort in superintending the affairs of this world. I see a lot of evidence for the existence of a natural world, one filled with rocks and trees and people. I see no evidence for the existence of a supernatural world. Thank you. One filled with gods, goddesses, spirits, and souls. I cannot prove that there are no gods or goddesses, but then Dave cannot prove that there are no leprechauns. Neither of our beliefs are matters of certainty. They are simply matters of weighing the evidence. If a supernatural realm existed and any one of its occupants wished to make his presence known to me, I assume he would be successful. This is particularly true for any of the monotheistic gods who are allegedly all-powerful and infinitely resourceful. If such a deity wanted me to know something, I would know it. Period. In discussions like these, two questions always come up, so I thought I'd address them at the outset. These questions are about the origins of the universe and of morality. That's it. There's the universe. Where did it come from? No one knows the answer to that question. For those of you who are hoping for a major announcement tonight, I'm sorry you'll be disappointed. What we do know is that for as long as there have been human beings, they have been inventing gods and goddesses to explain the origins of things. Just about every culture has a creation story. Christians content themselves with the Jewish creation story in Genesis. Compare that story with the creation story of the Native American Iroquois. Twin sons of the Sky People created the world. One twin, named Sapling, created all the good things, including useful plants and animals. The other twin, named Flint, created harmful animals, put thorns on plants, and created winter. Eventually the twins fought. Sapling won, but the influence of Flint persists. There are no good reasons for believing that either the Israelite story in Genesis or the Iroquois story is more historically accurate than the other. The fact is that we do not yet understand the origins of the universe, and as grown-ups must live with this uncertainty. The second question, morality. I'd like to compare two different approaches, a Christian and a secular. The Christian approach is built on three assumptions. Number one, a God exists and he cares about our behavior. Number two, morality is what this God says it is. And number three, humans are able to understand his instructions. I believe all three of these assumptions are flawed, and I hope that during the discussion to come we have time to go into that. By contrast, the secular approach is built upon two assumptions. First, morality can be defined as behavior which aims to increase well-being and reduce suffering. This is what most people actually mean when they use the term morality, at least outside of a religious context. And the second assumption, through reason and empathy, humans are able to determine or at least approximate what increases well-being or reduces suffering. Humans possess morality because they have the capacity to understand cause and effect and to empathize. Individuals do not want to suffer, and through reason and empathy, they can generalize that to others. Again, I believe the secular is the superior of the two approaches, and time permitting, we can go into why. Moving to other issues within tonight's preposterously broad subject, my objections to Christianity are too numerous to summarize in this short time. I can, however, categorize them. My contention is that Christianity is arbitrary, it has been disconfirmed, it is man-made, it is illogical, and it is immoral. I have arbitrary listed first because from it flow many of the other problems. Christianity teaches that its followers must possess a thing called faith, being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. In other words, faith means accepting that something is true despite insufficient grounds for believing it to be so. Faith replaces the customary reason for holding a belief, namely evidence and reason, with a mere desire to believe it. By definition, then, faith is arbitrary. Precisely because it does not require evidence, a person could have faith in anything, and his faith would be just as legitimate as anybody else's. People can, and do, have faith in the Hindu god Vishnu, or the Yoruban high god Olorum, just as fervently as they do in the Middle Eastern god Jesus. What determines a person's faith? Despite the large number of religions in the world to choose from, most people in any one place tend to follow the same religion or family of religions. This demonstrates that faith is generally not an individual decision, but rather the result of social conditioning. The religion people consider to be true is determined by the arbitrary accident of where they grew up. If my Christian friends in this room had been raised in Indonesia or China, most would have faith in what some other group of men told them. Would anyone here be persuaded if a 2,000-year-old Cambodian tradition said that a certain medicine man was divine and that you would be punished in another life if you failed to believe it in this one? These are arbitrary allegiances and as such are not something to be celebrated. The dominant role played by faith in Western civilization has gone so long unchallenged that few people see the perversity of complimenting someone by saying, "He's a man of faith," as if believing things without sufficient evidence were a commendable trait in a human being. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. I hope the ideas shared tonight make your trip worthwhile.